What you're looking at here is the Cleanrot sword, which is one of Elden Ring's many thrusting swords. When you're playing through the game, thrusting swords seem like just an okay option. They're fast, they're pretty long for how fast they are, and their damage is alright, but there's many things in this game that do way more damage or stagger enemies way easier, so they seem like just a middle of the road option. However, when you're fighting other players in PvP, thrusting swords reveal themselves as some of the most powerful weapons in the entire game, and also some of its most broken and unbalanced. Whether you're using it in your offhand to complement a different weapon that's in your main hand, or you're using it with both your hands, in which case you may just be looking at the strongest setup in the game based on who you ask, thrusting swords are absolutely terrifying, and they are a nightmare balance-wise. In today's video, we're going to go over what makes offhanding it so powerful, what makes two-handing it so powerful, and also talk about the bugs associated with the thrusting sword weapon class, along with what may be the only example in the game of weapons having the wrong stats needing to be swapped between one another. Stay tuned because we're going to go over quite a lot. The most common and perhaps the most powerful pairings for the offstock is going to be a main hand halberd or a main hand curved greatsword. These are some of the best medium speed weapons in the game, and then from time to time you may see somebody running it with an ultra greatsword too. All of these slower weapon classes love having an extremely fast weapon in your offhand to apply better pressure. The halberd, for example, is a very good weapon on its own, but other than its running R1, when it comes to fighting really good players, the rest of its moveset can be a little bit lackluster. However, when you throw something on such as an offstock, you start applying more pressure since they're not going to feel like they can consistently reaction roll the L1. Some people just straight up cannot see it coming and roll in time. And the same thing goes for curved greatswords and ultra greatswords. They have great qualities about them, but speed is not generally one of them, so having that as a weapon in your left hand that is able to strike so quickly is an extremely valuable asset to one of these setups, and it's why it's one of the more common dual-wielded setups you're going to see. Ultra greatswords in particular are going to have a true combo when you use a crouch attack and then Q and L1. While this is not unique to thrusting swords, it is going to be one of the stronger candidates for this type of true combo, not so much because of the additional damage, but because of the speed of the weapon. When you're not in a true combo situation, it still gives you a ton of utility, whereas a weapon like a warhammer, which also gets this crouch poke true combo, is a lot more reactable, so from neutral it's not as good. The thing is that quite a lot of the balance issues involving thrusting sword comes from when it's used in the offhand. It is both bugged and it is too powerful. Offstock has a ridiculously high bell curve between its speed and its range, making it to where you can effortlessly roll catch people, and just as effortlessly, reaction punish them when they use a move that's slightly out of range. The thing is that this is kind of the name of the game for thrusting swords, so if it was balanced properly with detractions in other areas, technically it could keep these qualities, but it's a couple less obvious aspects of the setup that make it overpowered. The first thing is that you cannot strafe it despite it being a thrusting sword. See, the thing is that it is going to have so much tracking while locked on, and it is so late into the animation that you are still turning while you have a hitbox in front of you. It is so egregious on the thrusting sword that you are literally able to use this weapon as a horizontal swiping attack if you are unlocked. This makes it to where instead of using timing and strafing to counteract the offstock setup, instead you're relying on passive poise. But this hides the second bug because in 1.10 they made it to where all weapons other than daggers are supposed to do half as much poise damage on the second hit. But for offstock, it is bugged, and it does the same amount of poise damage as the first hit did. There's a couple changes that From Software should do to make this a more balanced setup. The first thing is they need to take away its ability to track the opponent away. Yes, you should be able to turn in the first couple of frames of the attack, similar to thrusting swords in past Souls games, but you should by no means be able to keep turning while your attack hitbox is out. And while you're locked on, you should have extremely little to no tracking at all. The whole point of thrusting weapons is that they're strafable if your opponent's locked on and doesn't manually aim, so they need to add that to the weapon. Second thing is that they have to fix the poise damage. The way I see it going is it either needs to be the exact same poise damage as daggers, where the first hit does not poise break but the second one does, which is intentional, that is how daggers are supposed to work, or they make the weapon just the slightest bit slower and go with the normal formula for these weapon breakpoints, where the first one poise breaks but the second one does half as much. I think either one of these options will bring it in line. I think that having it reflect dagger poise damage is perhaps a little bit more interesting, but both are perfectly fine in my opinion. Before even factoring in an Ash of War, two-handing a thrusting sword is already a ridiculously powerful setup. You have an R1 that is borderline unreactable, an extremely powerful backswing that is able to catch people slacking a lot of the time, and then based on which one you're using, a lot of them have a very good R2 that its timing is able to complement as a roll catch for your R1 timing. Thrusting sword actually used to be quite a bit more powerful too. Its crouch attack used to be completely unreactable at frame 8. However, in a recent patch, what they did is they made it to where when you roll or you dodge forward with quickstep or bloodhound step, you get this version of the attack that's still as fast. However, if you get it from actually just crouching, the move's quite a bit slower, which makes a lot more sense balance-wise. Despite how insanely powerful thrusting sword is, it's actually not too far away from being a perfectly fine setup. It's not wrong for a weapon to be extremely powerful. What becomes an issue is when it starts completely dominating everything else. And specifically, quickstep and bloodhound step versions of a thrusting sword are able to absolutely destroy the mass majority of setups in the game. When you take a weapon that already has obscenely little end lag on its moves, and then you cut it even more with these Ash of Wars that are able to take some of the end lag off, you get some of the most unbelievably powerful weapons in the game, and based on who you ask, it's either the most powerful or second most powerful weapon setup other than power stance spears. With the couple of nerfs I have in mind, I don't intend on making thrusting swords bad, I just want them to be a little bit less stupid. So first things first, what we would do is make it to where the R1 chain has much less tracking. Just like offstock, you are not able to step to the side of any of these thrusting attacks, even though that is supposed to be their weakness. When you're locked on, you will have borderline no tracking at all, and when you're locked off, you will only be able to turn in the first couple frames of the animation, rather than such a large portion of it. This way, when you're aiming a direction in R1, it is more committal, and if someone decides to strafe you, they can. It has to be something you take into account as the thrusting sword player. The next nerf, I don't necessarily know if it could be limited to just thrusting swords, but regardless it is something that needs to happen, and that is to make it to where quickstep and bloodhound step are not able to cancel some of the end lag of your moves. This is too fast of a weapon to be so unpunishable with these Ashes of War. It is too powerful, and also at the same time, it's too stupid. The last thing I would consider doing, before just letting this loose and seeing how good or bad it is I would make it to where your R1 chain has a little bit more end lag. Even so much as like a frame would go a long way. It feels like you're never able to truly punish this weapon class, due to how quickly they're able to roll out of things, even without quickstep or bloodhound step in the picture. The last thing I want to talk about right now is the other bug that exists with this weapon class, and that is the discrepancy between the S-Stock and the Cleanrot Knight Sword. See, if you compare these two side by side, you can clearly tell that the S-Stock is a little bit longer, but for some ungodly reason, the hitbox of the Cleanrot Knight Sword is a little bit longer, meaning that there is almost no reason to use the S-Stock. It weighs half a pound more, it does less damage on the majority of infusions, and based on who you ask, it has a less helpful R2, even though I personally prefer it. I would make it to where the Cleanrot Knight is a little bit shorter with its hitbox, The S-stock could perhaps stay the same as it is now, but just make sure that the Cleanrot is a little bit shorter. That way it actually matches its in-game model. And with that list of changes considered, I think that Thrusting Sword would be in a pretty good place. They would still be very much speedy, rangy, and powerful, but a lot of the things that just make absolutely no sense for this weapon class to have would be nullified. Let me know what you think and know if there's any buffs or nerfs that you would give them, though I would think you're absolutely crazy if you want to buff this weapon class. And let's have a little bit of a conversation about how they could change this in any upcoming patches. With that being said, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.